Yeah.
Broadcast is live.
It says live and direct.
On my screen.
Oh my goodness.
What do you think, man?
It has
Glasses
been
or
a
no
while,
glasses?
y'all.
Gotta go no glasses?
I don't know. It's up to you. You want them to see your pretty eyes or the reflection?
Yeah. I want them to see my eyes, man. I want it because the eyes are the windows to the soul.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Windows to the soul.
So I'm trying to. Hey, did you share this thing yet? Because you know that's what we always do. You know what I'm saying?
Share it.
Share this bad boy.
Oh yeah, that's
man.
what we do. It's been a minute.
That's how we roll. After I turn down my volume and all that kind of good stuff. Because we got some deepness to go into now. We got some deep topics to go into now, man.
You know this.
You know what I'm saying? While we get set up, y'all know how we do. It's been a minute, but y'all know some things don't change. You know how we do.
We do. We gotta give you some time to get on to see what's there. We are. There it is. There you is. Share. Go and share. Share via. No, I don't have any of them. Back it up.
Ooh, that's hot.
There's that.
You know, there used to be my old stage name, Hot Chocolate.
With marshmallows, right? Or
back in the day.
Cream on top? No,
back in the day.
Creamy hot chocolate?
I used to roll. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? We got some pretty good topics, man. We got one pretty deep. It's been a minute. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's my bad, y'all. Life has been crazy. I'm sure you can't relate
it
at all.
It is, man. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. Hey, you had a birthday not too long ago, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to forget all about that.
What?
We're just gonna let that go.
You crazy, man. How old are you?
46.
46.
I'm at that age.
Man, 46. Man, I got t-shirts older than that, man.
What you doing wearing your daddy's t-shirts? What you talking
about? I remember 46.
What was that, last year?
No, that was 2 years ago.
Was it
46 was 46 was my bridge year. That was my
crossing over.
Yeah.
Crossing over. All right. See how long we've been on. We've been on for
giving folks a minute.
33 seconds. Yeah.
Right on.
We'll give y'all 3 minutes today. 3 minutes, because I know it's been a minute.
Hook them up with 3 minutes. Give them a little 3 minutes, something.
3 minutes.
A little something. So, yeah. I'm clicking around here on my other screen. Oh, there we go. Oh man, it took the screenshot of me up there with my glasses on.
Okay, it did. I saw that. I can change it though. Once it goes to YouTube.
Bomb diggity. My man JBK, man. 46 years old, man. I remember when you was like 44.
Yeah, I know, right? It's only like 2 years.
For reals.
And I tell you what, it was funny. My old roommate and I, when I turned 40, went to Vegas. He had so much fun running up to every person that you take pictures with down Fremont Street, going, "Guess how old he is?" I bet you can't guess. Every place we went. It was annoying, but it was memorable. Oh wait, 3 minutes and 37 seconds. I think it's about that time.
Man, that's skipped. Hey, I am Kirk M. Samuels,
and I am Jason B. Kendrick,
and we are the Men of Masculinity, baby.
That's right. We're just real men having real conversations for you. Tonight, it's real, baby. I got my Older Men shirt on because it's real. We're talking about real men.
I got my flannel mountain
shirt. That's right. You got his axe behind him.
Yeah, I got all that, man. I'm rolling in that, man. This is a pretty deep one, man. What should we talk about tonight, man? What do you think?
Man, well, I did say we were going to talk about trauma. And I didn't figure it's been a while. It's been a while since we've been on. Life has been crazy, and it's been a little traumatizing.
Yeah.
So I might as well dive in the deep end, get back into it.
I'll tell you what, man, this hot chocolate is traumatizing my tongue right about now.
You got to learn how to blow on it, man. You got to learn how to blow on it.
For real. Man, this joint is hot.
I can't do that.
Trauma, man. Trauma is kind of deep, man. I would say that probably most people have some kind of trauma.
I think pretty much everybody does.
I think you'd probably be hard pressed to find too many people without any kind of trauma, without any kind of, let me take a step back. What would you define as trauma?
I mean, there's so many kinds of trauma, so it's hard to encapsulate it. There's physical trauma, mental trauma, emotional trauma, trauma from neglect. There could be trauma from accidents or operations. I mean, all these different things. But what we tend to focus on, and I know what I tend to focus on, is a lot of the mental, emotional trauma that comes from childhood neglect, mental abuse, things like that, because those are the things I deal with the most, and the things that have, for lack of a better term, gotten in my way the most, because having trauma and dealing with trauma are sometimes two different things.
Wow. So I'm gonna go to what everybody does when they want to know what something means. I went to Google. Google says that trauma is the emotional response to a terrible event like an accident. 4-letter word for something bad happens to you, sexually down there. I don't want to get flagged for certain words. Or natural disaster. It says immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. Strained relationships.
See how they went mostly with the physical, and that's one of the things I think we need to talk about a lot, is that most people consider trauma merely physical. Oh, well, I had a car wreck, I'm physically damaged, or I was in the war and I'm physically damaged or whatever. But there's so much more to it. There's so many layers to it.
Yeah, I think speaking of layers, this conversation can be multi-layered. If you're watching us live right about now, whatever this is, the 14th at 7:30 something Mountain Time, you can comment. You can participate in this conversation by putting comments down here. We can see them on our screen and in the comments.
Make sure you go to the Men of Masculinity page. So click the link on ours, and once you go over there, if you leave a comment, we can actually see it live on our screen, and so we can chat with you.
Yeah, if you leave it on one of ours, we won't see it till we're done. But if you go to the Men of Masculinity page and comment on there, we can see your. So, but yeah, I mean, so your point was they focus mostly on the physical, but you think there's multi dimensions to trauma.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that, growing up the way I did, with most of my trauma coming from neglect and just that kind of critical father who was, I don't want to say emotionally abusive, but very, being critical and being a perfectionist, and not really give me, much of an opportunity to fail in the trying kind of thing. I didn't have one of those physically abusive, relationships with parents. So even though as I grew up, especially in my late teens and 20s, and got out of the house, went in the military and got out, I knew something was off. Like, I didn't feel natural or normal. Like, I didn't resonate with all the folks I was around. And so I knew something was off, but I didn't have an obvious thing. Like, there was no physical abuse. So I couldn't say, oh, well, he beat me up or she beat me up or this happened, so that's my thing. And I think that's the one thing that really comes up, especially for a lot of men nowadays, is that we judge so much by others. Well, my buddy over here used to get beat up by his dad or whatever. He had physical abuse. I never had that. Even though we may be exhibiting the same symptoms, I don't have a clear point of reference to go, oh, well, that's why. So it's like, well, even though I'm having these same symptoms, I'm still isolating, I'm still depressed, I'm still having suicidal ideations and things. But I don't have something to go, oh, well, it's because I got beat up or I got molested or whatever the thing is. I didn't have that thing to go, okay, that's what that is. And so a lot of times the emotional trauma or even the mental trauma can be more subdued, but it's still, the symptoms are the same. You will have the same and go, well, I don't understand why.
Yeah. One of our inner tribe, inner circle, Jenny Lynn says mental emotional abuse is actually worse than physical abuse. I think I heard somewhere that from somebody with some initials behind their name that, they kind of register in the same places in our brain. And so, the bruising can be the same, even though the affliction was different. And in my case, I think it was a little bit of both, maybe not even a little bit. It was probably a lot of both growing up. all kinds of abuse, tangible in terms of stuff you could physically see and the stuff you couldn't. And so I think I mean, I think in my case, and I almost wonder. So I look at it as a lot of things that we struggle with in these ways, like baggage, right? And it's stuff that we carry around like weights, like we pack it full of the garments of our abuse, of our the events, flashbacks, and all those kinds of things that I talked here in Google. We put all that in these zipped up cases that we tend to carry around, and I think I think when you when you never unpack your baggage, at some point it becomes luggage, and it just becomes something that you just carry, and you forget that you're even carrying it. And though I am confident that, like, say for example, my kids have never been, at least from me or even to my knowledge, abused in the ways that I was abused, I'm pretty sure that my abuse had somehow got passed along to them in some ways, or maybe it was some things in me that were amputated or not available, or whatever it was, stunted. I don't know, however you want to frame that. That somehow they were kind of secondary party to.
Right.
What's Keith talking about there?
Oh, our man Keith says, self-judgment does not require the abuse of others to hurt us, which is actually a great point, because a lot of what I received, and this may resonate with what you were saying, was because of my dad's own self-judgment. His father died when he was 5, and then he was raised by his single mother, and his 2 older sisters babysat him a lot. So when I came along as the firstborn and a boy, in his mind, he initially was like, well, I don't have a dad. Like, I didn't have a dad around, so I don't know how to be a dad. And so he just kind of winged it, or took the popular culture kind of view of things, and so some of what I dealt with and experienced was from that, and that could have been his own self-judgment coming out, his unhealed self-judgment in that way.
Yeah. Julian says again that it actually gets locked into the cellular memory of the brain and body and trapped there until it's cleared out / addressed. I couple years ago I was in therapy, and she had me do something I'd never done before. It was called ACE, like a adverse childhood experience questionnaire, basically. There was 10 questions on there, and 9.5 of those things happened to me. And the reason it was a half was because I gave credit to the fact that my mom was available in a particular way. Like, there was something that I got from her that otherwise I wouldn't have got. So, so yeah, when I went through that, I was like, man, some pretty jacked up kind of, man, that's a car accident. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, you get a car accident and the ambulance rolls up. Even if you get out saying I'm fine, they're still going to want to take you to the hospital.
Still check your blood pressure, give you some oxygen,
because there's a lot of stuff happening beneath the surface that we don't see because of the car accident that you've been in. And unfortunately, again, I think those things get passed along to people around us through the course of our life. And a lot of us, we have these wounds that we don't heal. And when you have wounds that you don't heal, they bleed on people around you, or you bleed on people around you. And so I think throughout the course of our lives, we go through stuff that, we may recognize it was a car accident. We may not. There's a lot of things on that list that I didn't even recognize that was something I needed to deal with. And so I think, to some degree, we need somebody to help us even unpack some things.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like the 12-step process. Acknowledgement is the first step. And I know for me, I walked around for many, many years kind of confused. Like, well, I didn't have all the abuse, like the physical stuff or this outward stuff that my friends and, coworkers and people had, where they had these stories where I'm like, oh, wow, they have all this abuse or these things that I didn't have. And so it wasn't until I was actually reading something about the symptoms of neglect. And just like you, I was kind of like, okay, check. And then of course, even coming to that realization for me was self-judgment, kind of to Keith's point, was that as soon as I saw, okay, I have all these symptoms of neglect, and this is why I'm responding this way to life, or I'm reacting this way. Then I immediately turned around to like, well, but I still love my parents, like this. I don't want to be judgmental towards them. Like I still love them, but there has to be some actual truth and acknowledgement that whether you love them or not, or whether you believe they did the best they could or not, there's still something here that needs to be uncovered, and that cellular memory needs to come out so it can be healed. Luckily for you and for all of us, when we normally find out these things, it's later in life, 20s, 30s, 40s, things like that. So the first thing you have to acknowledge is I'm no longer 5, 10, or 12.
Yeah.
I'm now older and have more capacity and ability to deal with these things.
Yeah, though some part of us can be stunted at that age. Some part of us can be stuck at whenever that time happened, or whenever that trauma happened. I gotta be honest, I'm having a hard time understanding the phrase. And Keith, I hope you're still watching, that maybe you can elaborate. I'm having a hard time with the phrase, just in terms of understanding what you mean by self-judgment does not require the abuse of others to hurt us. Does that make sense to you, Jason? Do you know what I'm trying to understand the
I can see from both sides. Like from him, I think from what he's saying is that when you're judging yourself, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else is doing something to you. You're just judging yourself in reference to them or to the outside influences. Now, although when you get into the kind of psychology of most people, especially developmental psychology, usually self-judgment comes from a critical parent, or there's some sort of influence makes you become very self-judgmental and very critical. I know I became very perfectionistic because my father was critical, because his way of trying to get the best out of me was to be critical.
Yeah.
And that was him doing the best he could. But then I took it on as, oh, well, I'm not good enough, so I need to make sure I'm self-judging and critiquing, basically.
Yeah. Hey, I guess I'm just, and like I said, man, Keith, I hope you're still watching. I'm just, in terms of clarification, does not require the abuse of others to hurt us. In other words, would that mean that I could be self-critical even if I wasn't hurt by somebody else? Is that what that means?
I think. Well, I think he's trying to say that just being self-judgmental doesn't require somebody else for you to hurt yourself. You're doing it to yourself, whether that's caused by somebody else's abuse or just your own thought processes. It's a inside job.
Okay. I think oh, here we go. When you feel, when we feel a used, it comes from self-judgment. That is, I think that might be a typo in there.
Yeah, I think
maybe it's when we feel abused, it comes from self-judgment, as self-judgment grows from it. I think there might be a typo in there. Then maybe Jenny Lynn chimes in. Judgment.
Yeah, judgment is actually the greatest form of abuse on the planet, whether it comes from yourself or others. It kills all possibility. And that's kind of whether it came from somebody else, whether it's you doing it yourself, and most likely if you're self-abusing or self-neglecting or all those things, whether it came from somebody else or not, at some point you got to adult up and go, okay, it's my responsibility to acknowledge this, to take action towards healing this, and to know that I'm no longer that age, or I'm no longer this child that didn't have the tools to deal with this. And now I have the personal responsibility to go, okay, these are issues that I'm now acknowledging, and now I need to seek help. I need to seek support, and find some safe place to verbalize these things, because it's like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, a memory without the emotional attachment is wisdom. And by not talking out these things, when you talk out your abuse, when you talk out your neglect, when you talk out your self-judgment, when you talk out those things that are inside you, each time you talk it out, you're releasing the emotional attachment, until at some point you get to the place of, it no longer bothers me to talk about this. It's just a thing in the past. I don't have the emotional attachment. And that's where the wisdom comes from. I've heard you talk several times about some of your things, which, when you were in the car by yourself, like getting ready to check out, like, I'm sure that was not easy to talk about initially.
Right.
And then as the more you talk about it, the less less of that attachment it has. And then in a way, the more powerful it becomes because people are like, damn, how can you even talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And some of that is, for me anyway, is what you're talking about specifically is me taking the power of my story back, or taking my power back in terms of, you know, when there is some actual, abuse happening, I've experienced it making me feel powerless. Um, and so for me to have the moments in life that I came across a trauma bridge, or I came to the foot of a trauma bridge, for me to step in over that, or step onto that bridge, was me choosing to take my power back and take my story back. I think, I think quite often, when we have trauma, when we have, any one of those things, I mean, I think we notice it most when it affects or impacts the people around us, specifically relationships. Um, and, I think maybe that's one telltale sign of, like, okay, maybe I got some stuff I need to deal with. Maybe I keep ending up with the same type of person who was just like so-and-so back in my past, or whatever it was. Maybe that's a sign of, like, okay, there's some stuff I need to deal with.
Well, I mean, even to that point, relationships are mirrors. And a lot of times we get so used to our own stuff, we don't realize that we're bleeding or bleeding all over the place until we get into a relationship with somebody else. And they're like, hey, you're bleeding on me. Or, you're traumatized, or you're toxic. And it's like, oh, am I? I
Yeah.
didn't know. But once you get into that, you have that mirror in front of your face, like, oh, look, now you can see.
Yeah. Man, Jenny Lynn, you keep going. We're gonna have to. You're
We're
gonna
going
be
to put
a
her on the
subject
show.
matter expert on this bad boy for real. We don't tempt us. We've thrown people on board here. And there is so much of that stuff. She talks about a lot of things being subconscious.
Yeah.
I remember, man. I'll never forget this day, man. I was on the step mill at Planet Fitness several years ago. Well, maybe 2-3 years ago. And like this whole day, I had felt this heaviness, man. I felt like this. It's like a cloud. That's the best way I can describe it. It was like a cloud all day long, and I didn't know why. I didn't have any. I didn't have any real reason to have that. There was nothing really going on in life, none of that kind of stuff. And so while I was on the step mill, I was listening to "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins, and there was a part kind of near the beginning where he was talking about his childhood, and he was talking about his growing up, and a lot of stories anecdotally about his brother and his father and the way his father was and all that kind of stuff. And then, man, it totally hit me. The light came on, and I went and looked back into my pictures, and I have a picture of my father's gravestone. And sure enough, that was the day that he had passed away. But I mean, in my mind, like in my conscience, I had not, I wasn't thinking about that at all during that whole day. But to her point of a lot of things being subconscious, even anniversaries and dates of when things happen can be subconscious, and we don't even realize that, that I might be struggling with something today that I don't even realize because it's in my subconscious and not my conscience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you brought it up earlier. I mean, I just had a birthday recently. I mean, when we're younger, that's the biggest thing. That your birthday is the biggest thing. And then as you get older, you get to the point of like, I just want to ignore it. Just let that slide by. Like, I think there's something between 40 and 50 where you're just kind of like, I'll let that slide by, which is funny because it shows a lot of how we shift mentally and emotionally, because things that used to be important to us aren't anymore, and different things take precedence, and so things like that. But it is funny because you can self-judge or self-demean, or you can turn it into a judgmental thing. Like I remember my late 20s, 30s, because of when my birthday was and where I lived in Breckenridge, and that was mud season. That was shoulder season. It was between summer and winter. So like the town cleared out and nobody was there. So every time I tried to, plan a party or try to do it big, it was like, oh, I'm out of town, or I'm on the beach, or I'm like, so then I just kind of got this mindset like, meh. And even those little things still stem back to the childhood trauma. And it's always funny to peel back those layers of, well, why is this bothering me?
Yeah.
Or why am I turning this into a thing? Well, this can turn into that, peeling the onion or that rabbit hole where you end up going all the way back to, oh, well, it's because I didn't feel cared for, or I didn't feel seen, or whatever maybe that story is that's underlying at the core.
Yeah.
Because we're always repeating the same patterns, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah. And again, I think, I come back to relationally speaking, because that's kind of where that Google definition went to. There's a such thing as trauma bonding. So that, people meet and all of a sudden, they begin to connect in the space of their trauma, and they almost exist relationally in the toxicity of the mixing of the wounds and the bleeding from the wounds that they have in common. And they think, oh, wow, we have this connection because we both experienced this. Well, in actuality, you could very well be contributing to one another's trauma, or triggering one another's PTSD, post-trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. So, there's all these implications into, it's not just a silo of us. Like, it's our conscience, it's our subconscious, it's also our pre-conscious, our I'm making up a word, extra conscious, in terms of consciousness around us and the world around us, and that it could even lead us to people that we form relationships and connections with, but it could be unhealthy.
It's a great point, because I look back, especially the last 3 attempted relationships I had, where it was just dating or whatnot. A lot of that was it was like my learning process through trauma bonding, because when you're at that energy level of trauma, when you're not healed or you haven't completely dealt with it, you're still at that energy level. And I feel like sometimes when you're dealing with that and you're working on that and you're pulling the energy out, it becomes very attractive to somebody who's in that same place. And ways you can really tell is a lot of times love bombing. It's really hot and fast and hard, and immediately it's like you see each other and it's this star-crossed lover syndrome. All of a sudden, boom.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, this is it. This is the one. And hopefully very quickly you realize it's not, because it is trauma bonding. But when it's not a healthy, gradual growth, get to know each other sort of thing, you can tell this person is attracted to you energetically by your own traumatic energy. That's what's attractive to them and to you. That's why you're attracted to each other, because you see the same in them.
Yeah. Again, our resident expert here, Jenny Lynn, you go, girl. I'm appreciating this. She goes, you can reframe the story and write a new one. Oftentimes the story we decided about an event is not what actually happened, even if the attachment to the meaning to it has been assigned. I actually I'm really unpacking for specific purposes. I'm speaking about this soon, but every superhero has a sad backstory, right? And so, you can look at my sad backstory and you can say, man, that happened to me, and that happened to me, and that happened to me, and that happened to me. You can also look at it and say, okay, that happened for me, that happened for me. That I'm not saying that negative stuff doesn't hurt. I'm saying that, what you've been through could quite literally equip you for the superpower that you're meant to have in this world. And to me, that's the whole idea of reframing whatever that story is.
Yeah, to Lynn's point, when you get into kind of the personal development speak of it, there's the realm of now and the realm of meaning. Well, there's the event that happened, which is innocuous. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just an event. And then there's the realm of meaning, the story we put on it. And by reframing that story and taking our power back from it, that's how trauma goes from, like you said, trauma to superpower. Everything that happened in our lives or to us can become for us when we take that and go, okay, now I can relate to all these people. Like in my life, I can relate to all these people with emotional trauma, with neglect, with CPTSD, with all these different things, because I've had that experience just like you.
Yeah.
Everybody who's had the similar experiences, there is no judgment from you and I, because we're like, oh yeah, no, I've been there. I've been down in that ditch with you.
Yeah.
So that becomes that we get to reach down and help them up.
Yeah.
But until we start to do the work, then we're just spreading the trauma and bleeding.
And that's, I mean, that point right there, I think is the key to it all, is recognizing and unpacking that, and doing the work involved with addressing it, healing it. You know, that's not to say you'll never have a scar. You'll have scars, but you know, but scars are beautiful when they're former wounds. When you make it, you know, when you make it into something, you know, healing, and you can bring healing to other people. But I think the important part for us, and you know, I mean, we're two guys, so I'll say for men, you know, man, we got to deal with that father wound.
Yeah.
You know, most of us have one. We got to deal with whatever that father wound was, and not pass that along as best as we can anyway, in terms of to the women around us, to our kids, to just the rest of the world. You know, hurt people. So, you know, we got to do our best to not pass that along. And you know, and I think the healthier we are in that way, the better we are even in the dating circles. You know, because we're healthy, and unhealthy people are less attractive to us because we're, I mean, healthy, you know, relatively speaking, as healthy as possible. And, you know, there's so many things now, and you and I joke about this offline. There's so many things now that when I see, I'm like, oh man, that drives me crazy. Like, man, what is up with that? I mean, like, oh, that is not attractive.
I mean, we've done whole 45-minute videos on some of those things that make us nuts. I mean, but like to your point, every man needs to deal with his father wound. But especially nowadays, and we talk about nice guy syndrome all the time, men, you got to acknowledge and talk about the mother wound or the mother trauma as well, because most of us had a single mother or our fathers weren't around. So there was the father wound, but then that was also compounded by the mother wound. And you have, I love my mother to death, and I know you love your mother, and we love all the women in our lives, but we have to acknowledge that they're not innocent, and we're not innocent in those relationships either.
Right.
Like, when we can't, I still sometimes struggle with this. I mean, the words get stuck where it's like, I can't acknowledge that both sides, you know, was always dead. He was the obvious one, so it was always his fault. But I can't acknowledge that there was a part to be played on both sides. And then number 3 right here, you know, me, myself, and I had my part to play. And what is sick about trauma, especially childhood trauma that is ongoing, is that after the event is over, after that childhood is over, after you become an adult, it's not your parents' fault anymore. Now you're doing it to yourself. And it's always us beating ourselves and doing it to ourselves. And that's why that acknowledgement and personal responsibility comes in, because if we don't take personal responsibility for it, I mean, nobody else is here. And I guarantee you, if you're like me and you've been traumatized and you're working through it, you probably don't have a healthy relationship. You probably don't have a lot of support around, because you're still in the trauma. Still dealing with it. So there's not a lot of healthy around you. So get around others and start talking about this. Get into men's circles. Start talking about these things.
You know, I mean, I've found myself, I mean, pre-work, I found myself in unhealthy relationships, in that, I mean, I brought my boy into the relationship looking for, you know, a woman to be the mom to that little wounded boy. And that was a recipe for disaster. Never do that again, kind of thing. And so we do have to get around other guys. We do have to heal that stuff. We do have to work on that stuff. I'm glad that Jenny Lynn chimed in again with women have to address this too, and not project their wounds on the men and boys in their lives. I mean, I would venture to say that the same way I say that most men have a father wound, I would say that most women have been wounded or hurt or abused by a man. And so, you know, if that's not dealt with, then guess what? When the next man comes into your life, who's not the man that did that, whatever that thing was, you know, you could quite easily project that onto him, or you could quite easily, you know, and that, again, like she said, that could be, you know, men or a son. You know, you could dump all of that onto him, and he had nothing to do with all that. So yeah, this is definitely not a gender specific thing. This definitely goes both ways, and we got to deal with that stuff.
Well, you see it a lot of times too. I mean, so many single mothers, and they've got their sons, and because they have their sons, they may have trouble dating, and they may have trouble finding healthy relationships. And without being conscious of it, they may trauma bond with their son. And then when their son grows, and is trying to get out of the house, they may be subconsciously or maybe consciously trying to sabotage his growth or whatever because they're afraid of them leaving.
Yeah,
I'm seeing that quite a bit.
That can look a number of different ways, but yeah, this is definitely not a gender specific thing. And I think, again, I think when we look at the state of how we relate to one another, particularly in a dating or whatever you want to call that kind of relationship, I think, the better we are at dealing with our past and with whatever wounds that we have from our past, whatever trauma we have from our past, the better equipped we are to be as whole and as healthy as possible for those that are in our present.
Yeah. If you are having trouble, I know in my experience, a lot of times there's that fear of, well, what if they find this out? Or what if they know my secret? Or what's not? Well, the more you do the work and the more you heal that trauma, the less you care. I don't know. I've said things in first dates or just in a social environment where they're like, I can't believe you said that. I'm like, what? It happened. That's my experience. I've worked through some of that trauma or enough of that trauma. So there's not this big hairy secret that I've got to keep in the closet that's, eating my clothes and chewing up my shoes and tearing up my house.
Yeah. I mean, and I've learned to not dump that on people, but I've also learned to be able to effectively communicate what all that is. And when I wrote about all that stuff in my book and just speaking about stuff or just one-on-one conversation with people or whatever, I mean, I am normally the first one to get vulnerable and the first one to get transparent. But to me, I look at that as my opportunity to allow the other person to say me too. Yep. And to disarm the situation of like, hey, I have nothing, I have nothing to be above somebody else's experience. I got my junk too.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you want to find people who are willing to share their stuff, because it's the ones that are hiding. They're going to be the more judgmental.
Now, some people overshare though. Some people some people like, come on, man, you ain't got,
Well, and that's part of that.
It's where it's like not even appropriate to be sharing something. It's like not even the space or the time, and people just be dumping all their stuff. I mean, so there's a fine line in that.
Well, that's part of the trauma too. That's the dump trucking we talk about, whether you just dump your stuff on somebody because they're nice enough to listen. That's not healthy. It's got to be right place, right time, like Kirk says. I mean, it's good to be able to acknowledge your stuff because you've worked on it and want to heal it. But we're not dumping on people. It's got to be right time, right place. And that's another sign. If you are dumping your stuff on any person who will listen, it's time for you to go find some help and share, because you got a lot of stuff that you're not letting out. So it's being like vomited on the first person who's nice enough to listen to you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a holistic kind of person in terms of approach. And I think physically, we need to be able to open up to a medical doctor. I think mentally we need to be able to open up to, somebody in the mental space, therapy, counseling. And I think spiritually, we need to be open spiritually in some kind of, spiritual practice or whatever it is, where, all those parts of us can be healed. Because I think quite often when these things happen to us that cause trauma, they happen in multi dimensions, and you can heal or work on one, but the other is being neglected, and you can't understand why you can't get past it. You can't get past it because you haven't addressed all of the wound.
Yeah, you got to think about it like you're like a car, and you got your four tires. You got your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. Mm-hmm. And if you're focused on one of them, you're not going too far. You're dragging the other three, or you got three flat tires and one that's maybe overinflated. Right. It's got to be a balanced approach, a holistic approach, because we have all those things. And if we're not focusing, or at least spending some time or getting some energy out in those areas, then it's going to unbalance us. It's going to make us.
And I love your point about taking ownership, man. I love your point about, sometimes you can't blame somebody else. Sometimes it's you, or I mean, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's like me. Like why'd this happen to me? Because me, because I did that, or because I created this scenario. I mean, so we have to take ownership of, we got to own the junk that's in our trunk.
Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow and a cold shower to take when you wake up one day and realize you're the only one in your house and nobody else is there, but you're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's you doing it to you.
Yeah. And you're the common
shit.
factor in every bad relationship you've ever had.
That's why I've been single for almost 8 years or whatever it is now, because
And
I
so
realized I did it.
yeah. Yeah. And exactly. It's like until you fix me, then you'll probably have a hard time with we, because if nothing else, there'll be 50% of that weed that's going to be jacked up. So, so lining up on a runway here, since we've been at it for
3-1 south.
So, I mean, I think, all right, we got one last comment from Jenny Lynn here. Yes, it's like that old attitude poem from school. Life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. Yes. Boom. I'm digging that. Yes. And so I think in trauma, the whole idea of trauma, a lot of us have been through, are going through, will go through some stuff. And that stuff is going to have a residual effect on us. And in the negative aspect, it could present as trauma. Mm-hmm. I think it's imperative for us to look back at our to unpack our baggage, to go through, pull out this shirt, pull out this sweater, pull out this hoodie, put out this, whatever it is, and figure out, okay, what do I do with this? May not necessarily be a bad thing, but either way, what do I do with this? And then address it. And in most cases that involves somebody else, because a lot of things, it's very hard to do alone. And I know guys need other guys more than we like to lean on. So
yeah, and that's something. I mean, if you're still in denial, if you still haven't quite figured it out, if you don't think you have trauma and you went through the last 18 months, you've been traumatized. This was a traumatic event. We have all got issues, and we've all had energy built up around this event. So it's something to acknowledge. I know I went to a personal development week-long thing, and in my head before I went there, I was very much in resistance, going, I don't want to go to this goal setting thing. I don't have any goals. I'm just trying to find my base and my center again. I'm just trying to get back to me. And the first 2 days they spent acknowledging and talking about the last 18 months through COVID and all this silliness, that we have trauma, we have energy built up, we have emotions that have come about because this is a traumatic event. So if you're watching this and you're like, I'm not traumatized, well, guess what? You're just ignoring the fact that you just went through a traumatic event and you're not dealing with it. So we're all traumatized, and the more we share, the more we acknowledge it, the more we make friends, and we create support systems. Because it's not about them and us, it's about we.
And dealing with that and working with that, man, I think is absolutely huge and profound, and we all need a collective. And we all need to do some decompressing, and all the political stuff, all the COVID stuff, all the people dying, or just whatever it is, man.
Best thing you can do: take your TV, throw it out the window, start reading books, because
and talk to people. I mean, interact with people. I mean, as best as possible. Interact with people. I mean, you can do teletherapy now if you need to. Counselors and stuff, therapists are doing that. We need to get out of our isolation bubbles that we've been in for most of the last year and a half, and we need to begin to interact. We need to begin to get connected back with our humanity, and the fact that we are human and we are living a common human experience, and we need to do that. So
that's something we should research. I wonder how many more cases of agoraphobia there are now after being isolated in your own house for 18 months. People now can't leave.
That's a good question, man. I don't know.
It's my sixth sense of humor. I'm like,
That's a great question, man. So, JBK, I love you, brother.
Love you, Kirk M. Samuels.
Hey, and if you're watching this, and if you want to get together with some people, man, call us up. We'll go play golf with you.
Play golf with you. And gentlemen, as you're watching this in the past and in the future and whenever you're watching this, check in with us, because we'll be having some online and in-person men's groups coming up. We've got the men's secret circle and then the inner circle for those of you who are ready to deep dive and do some work. So keep your eyes open. That will be coming soon. We love y'all. Thank y'all. Share, like, send it. If you have comments, if you have suggestions, let us know. We can talk all day, but we want to talk about what you want to talk about.
Jenny Lynn, thank you so much You were like
Jenny Lynn's our third. She's our Robin to our Howard Stern. She knows it all.
She's back there, man. She's doing her thing. She's like the director up in the booth. You know, we're doing the show. She's talking in our ear. Thank you so much, sis. Appreciate you. I love you. You got some good fellas that you've given birth to, by the way.
That's absolutely right.
Anyhow, all right, brother.
All right. Y'all have a good night and a good weekend. We love y'all. Peace. Bye.